We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's...
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hello and welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And today we're discussing The Day the Earth Froze from 1964.
The Day the Earth Froze from 1964 was originally a film called Sampo from 1959 and directed by Aleksandr Ptushko and Risto Orko. Written by Väinö Kaukonen, Viktor Vitkovich, and Grigori Yagdfeld.
Perfect.
Based on the story Kalevala by Elias Lönnrot, and produced by Risto Orko for Mosfilm's Suomi-filmi.
Suomi means finish. The Day the Earth Froze stars Andris as Lemminkäinen, Kivi as Annikki, Orochko as Louhi, Voronov as Ilmarinen, Urho Somersalmi as Väinämöinen, Ada Vostok as Mother of Lemminkäinen, Georgi Miljar as Sorcerer, Mikhail Troyanovsky as Soothsayer, and in the English dub, Marvin Miller is the narrator. When the film was released in America, the names of the actors were scrubbed and they were given new names. Lemminkäinen was said to be played by John Powers, Annikki was said to be played by Nina Anderson, Louhi was Ingrid Elhardt, Ilmarinen was Peter Sorenson, and Laura Jenkins as Lemminkäinen's mother.
At least that's the best we've been able to figure out. The film opens with a blue font over a blue background, looking very cold, listing many fake names to make this film appear more American. Mm-hmm. And then a narrator tells us that throughout history, people have listened to the storyteller, the men who could fashion myths and fairy tales and make them live for his listeners. Such men were the Brothers Grimm in Germany and Hans Christian Andersen in Denmark. And such a man was Elias Lönnrot in Finland, the story you're about to see. Long ago, in a faraway place called Kalevala, there was a village of fisher people. The land they lived in was large and beautiful and was blessed with great rivers filled with fish, wonderful forests with tall trees, and green fields. And the people toiled very hard, for it had been promised that if they worked the earth and the seas, that one day they would be given, as the reward, the magical Sampo, the mill of everything. A marvelous machine that could give anything to its owner, endless gold, silver, jewels, and the most wonderful of all, flour and salt. Such was the magic of the Sampo. Now it so happened that Ilmarinen had a beautiful sister named Annikki, who we don't even know yet.
We do see her frolicking with the animals a la Snow White. It is said, the legend goes on, that when Annikki falls in love, that will mean that the time has come for the Sampo to be forged. Alas, Annikki remains single as a Pringle. But that's only because she hasn't met the yellow-haired feller of trees, Lemminkäinen. We see Studley Lemminkäinen taking out an entire forest. However, he and his men don't know that all this time they're being watched by a witch.
Lemminkäinen is told it's time to take a rest, so he starts his commute home. He hops on a log and surfs it down the river until he runs into Annikki doing laundry on the shore.
After a brief introduction, she to him and he to her, he pulls off, leaving her alone in nature's bower. Bears are dancing and animals are frolicking. Annikki runs home to tell her brother about Lemminkäinen because she is quite smitten with him. Then we see some townsmen coming to beg Ilmarinen for that Sampo, but he says he can't make that now. He needs the fire of heaven, which the witch Louhi has stolen.
Now we're at Pohjola, where we see the witch Louhi and her trolls, who refer to themselves as wizards, are working unsuccessfully to forge their own Sampo. One tells Louhi that there is only one man who can forge a Sampo, and that's Ilmarinen.
He conjures up an image of Ilmarinen by spitting into some lava or something.
He chants, Ilmarinen come before us, Ilmarinen stand before us, Ilmarinen come before us, Ilmarinen stand before us.
And for those efforts, he's rewarded with a vision of Ilmarinen and Annikki talking.
Louhi knows that Annikki is Ilmarinen's sister, so Louhi devises a plan and she sends her cloak out to bring Annikki back to her.
She knows that she can ransom Annikki for Ilmarinen's help in building that Sampo.
So the cloak flies off and finds Annikki on a boat.
It becomes the sail of the boat.
and immediately pulls her off to Pohjola, to Annikki's surprise.
However, Lemminkäinen sees her being carried off.
And somehow he knows where she's going. He rushes off to tell Ilmarinen, and the two of them intend to go to Pohjola to rescue her.
And we did see Annikki being imprisoned by the witch, shut into a cave on Pohjola.
Ilmarinen and Lemminkäinen go to Väinämöinen to ask how they might find Louhi and Pohjola. Väinämöinen says that Pohjola is a faraway island, and they will need a boat.
Väinämöinen says that Louhi's lair is at the edge of the world, and to get there, they must build a boat that will carry them over the waves like a white swan. Lemminkäinen wants to know how to build such a boat. Väinämöinen says that the boat is in this ancient oak tree, gesturing to a huge tree standing next to them. As the bear watches, they chop the tree down and hollow it out. Väinämöinen wishes them well as the boat flies off in Pohjola's general direction.
Yeah, the tree was holding a pretty nice boat.
Took a lot of work, though. I imagine this took a month at least.
So now we're back with Annikki, and she's exploring the cave in which she's imprisoned. She comes across several large bags and chains. The bags contain the four winds and the mist, the north, south, east, and west winds and the mist. Annikki starts to free the north wind when Louhi comes upon her. So this is where I find you, she says, and drags Annikki off.
Now there's big news on Pohjola. Lemminkäinen and Ilmarinen are in sight. Louhi is thrilled. Her plan is proceeding nicely. Lemminkäinen immediately challenges Louhi to an archery fight, arrows and such, for the fair Annikki. Louhi instead negotiates two tasks for Annikki's return.
The first is to plow her field. The catch? It's overridden with snakes. Lemminkäinen agrees, but says that he'll require a horse.
Louhi doesn't want Lemminkäinen feeding her horse to the snakes, so Ilmarinen says that he'll build Lemminkäinen a horse.
Then they go off to start their devil's work. The sorcerer pulls Louhi aside and tells her that she mustn't allow Ilmarinen to build a horse because then Lemminkäinen will be successful in his task, and then they will have to return to Annikki because, as we all know, a witch is always true to her word. She tells him not to worry and whispers something in his ear that causes him to light up.
Louhi's plan is to destroy Lemminkäinen's cool swan boat, which the trolls do gleefully. Meanwhile, Ilmarinen is hammering a bit in that forge, and he makes a really cool fire horse. It looks like it should fly majestically across the heavens, but they hook it up to a plow instead.
It's red hot, but it doesn't seem to mind. So the horse begins its plowing, and Lemminkäinen wrestles with a large snake for dramatic effect, while the wizards/trolls laugh. The snake is quickly disposed of, and the field is plowed, which takes all of about 8 seconds.
Now that they're done, of course they want Annikki. The witch says they can have her, but it won't do them any good. She takes them to where their boat was moored and explains the wreckage by saying that a giant fish swam by, flipped its tail, and wrecked their boat.
This isn't a problem, says Ilmarinen. He'll simply build a new boat, this time out of iron. And so he does. This boat has a big moose head mast. Once finished, Ilmarinen sends the still flaming boat down the ramp and to the sea, where several of the wizards/trolls are still in the boats.
And they moan, "What will become of us?"
The flaming boat crashes into several of the smaller troll-ridden boats, sending their passengers into the sea.
Ilmarinen petulantly demands that Louhi give Annikki back now. The witch scolds Ilmarinen. He hasn't done anything for her yet. I guess the horse didn't count at all. So she asks for the second favor. She wants, can you guess what it is? A Sampo.
She says that he will forge a Sampo or he will never see his sister again. Ilmarinen pleads with her. He says he'll do anything she asks of him, but all that she wants is a Sampo.
Now on task, Ilmarinen demands some lamb's wool, the feather of a swan, and a barleycorn. Louhi tells her minions to grab a whole lamb, an entire swan, and a whole bushel of barley. And so they do.
Because, as we all know, witches are nothing if not generous.
Now Louhi watches as Ilmarinen starts to work, but something's not coming together. Ilmarinen needs the fire that burns in the sky. When he asks this of Louhi, she's aghast. She doesn't want to give it up, but Ilmarinen is adamant. It's the only fire with which he can forge the Sampo.
Louhi thinks that this is a trick to get the heavenly flame away from her, but her men plead with her to let Ilmarinen have the heavenly flame because they won't really have need of it once they have a Sampo to provide them with salt and flour and honey and gold and silver.
They're very gross trolls, flicking their tongues here and there, unnecessarily.
So Louhi tells them to retrieve the heavenly flame, And the wizards/trolls bring back a flaming pot and remove a flaming cow's head, which Ilmarinen throws into the fire. He tells Louhi that her men will have to work the bellows.
Ilmarinen is pounding on something, and Louhi impatiently demands to know what's taking so long. Ilmarinen demands the fire be hotter, so the trolls have to work harder and harder. Then they have to bring in a few thousand gallons of water to douse that fire, and from the forge emerges something? It's pretty cool, though. It's red hot with a green and red glistening sheen on top, and I don't know, I thought this was like a really awesome effect. But now it's time for a demonstration. To prove that it works, Ilmarinen commands the Sampo to make gold, salt, and flour. And so it does.
Now that he's done everything that Louhi has asked, he once again demands that she set Annikki free, and this time she says she will do that. And so Annikki is brought to Ilmarinen and Lemminkäinen, leaving a trail of blooming tulips behind her.
Louhi hates that.
Louhi tells him to hurry up and get her out of there before she ruins the whole island with her tulips.
On the way back to Kalevala, Annikki asks how they, meaning Lemminkäinen, rescued her. And Lemminkäinen fesses up that it really was all Ilmarinen. He made the Sampo for Louhi. Annikki pouts and frets that now their people are deprived of the Sampo.
But that's not a problem, says Ilmarinen. Once I get you home, I'll return to Pohjola for the Sampo. But Lemminkäinen thinks that will take too long. He jumps up and says, no, I'm going to go back for that right now, and he jumps overboard before anyone can stop him.
On Pohjola, the trolls are fighting over the Sampo's output. Lemminkäinen is back, and he stabs that bag of mist with his sword, releasing it, and obscuring Louhi's view of everything. Not to worry, though, because she conjures the mist back into the bag. But it's too late. The many-colored dome of the Sampo is now gone.
Louhi and her men look to the sea to find that Lemminkäinen has already set sail back to Kalevala with the Sampo in tow. So Louhi sends a storm.
She releases that north wind. Lemminkäinen's boat is wrecked in the sea and the surf, and the trolls rejoice.
Back in Kalevala, Ilmarinen is trying to comfort a sullen Annikki. He tells her that Lemminkäinen will return soon, and when he does, Ilmarinen will dance with Annikki at her wedding.
Now we meet Lemminkäinen's mom. Some village women come to console her about her dead son, but Mom's in denial. She goes to talk to a birch tree to ask about her boy, but the tree just birches about her own problems. And then Mom wanders off.
So Lemminkäinen's mother tries to figure out who to ask next. So she asks the road. But the road has his own problems. But he does offer a shred of advice. Don't tread on me.
It's more of a warning than an advice. Finally, she asks the sun, who helps a little bit more.
What kind of religion do these people practice where they would ask the road before they ask the sun?
Really, the sun can see all. The sun tells her to look for her son in the north, in Pohjola, where he is a prisoner of Louhi, which we already knew, of course. Lemminkäinen's mother wanders down to the shore where nothing happens. Actually, it was cut out of this movie. She really does a lot to rescue her son. But for the purposes of this film, we don't see that.
Sometime later, Lemminkäinen walks onto the shore and collapses. Annikki and Lemminkäinen's mother run up to him, but Lemminkäinen isn't in the mood for happy reunions. I have no right to be happy, he says, for I have destroyed the Sampo.
He tells Annikki that she should forget about him and his mother, that she shouldn't comfort him, but now the whole town is there. Ilmarinen takes a little chunk of the Sampo that remains from Lemminkäinen and hands it to Väinämöinen, who predicts that one day this small piece of the Sampo will bring all the townspeople joy.
Back in Pohjola, Louhi is having the sorcerer conjure up an image of Kalevala. Kalevala come before us, Kalevala stand before us. They see that Lemminkäinen is still alive and among them. So Louhi tells her cloak to prepare to go to Kalevala to destroy the village.
However, this time it doesn't go alone, it takes her with. And she arrives just in time for the wedding of Lemminkäinen and Annikki. Louhi is watching this, and she promises them a wedding gift that they won't soon forget. Lemminkäinen and Annikki get in a boat with 20 or so blondes paddling across the bay. They get out, and now it's time for everyone to sing and dance. Lemminkäinen and Annikki go into a chapel, and everyone follows.
As the ceremony continues, Louhi steals the sun. The villagers are alarmed at the sudden darkness. What happened to the sun? Väinämöinen says that evil times are falling upon them, and Annikki says that there can be no happiness without the sun. So with torches in hand, the villagers sullenly go back to their homes. Meanwhile, Louhi returns to Pohjola with the sun between her legs.
And she locks that up like she does the wind. And to add insult to injury, she releases that wind, sending a blizzard to Kalevala, where it now looks absolute zero.
In Kalevala, it's cold. Deer die in the street. Swans fall frozen from the sky.
Lemminkäinen decides to go outside for some dumb reason. He picks up a dead swan and carries it off. He takes it to Annikki's snowy cabin, where they try to warm it up before Lemminkäinen declares that it's actually dead. He tries to look into Annikki's eyes, but she can't face him. So he goes back outside, this time to beg Ilmarinen to make a new son. Ilmarinen reluctantly agrees to try, and the clanging of his anvil brings the whole town a-running.
Väinämöinen comes by as well and asks what Ilmarinen is working on, and Lemminkäinen pipes up that Ilmarinen is making a new son. Väinämöinen says that this is a futile task. The only thing that can be done is to release the son. So Lemminkäinen tells the people of the village to draw their swords. But Väinämöinen says that this is not the way. To defeat Louhi, they will have to use cantillés, and that they can find as many as they need within the trees of the forest.
This is a stringed instrument, and the way to make it is to have all the men of the village cut down trees for the wood. They must also carry their boats to the frozen sea. As for the women, they must throw their silver and gold into the crucible of Ilmarinen to make the strings. And everyone gets to work in a montage. Everyone meets on the shore. Väinämöinen activates the northern lights to guide them. Some men walk and some men push the boats across the shore, and the women remain behind.
Louhi can see the men gathering with their harps on the shore of Zapajola. Do they think they're going to a wedding feast, she asks. Now the men, some sitting in boats and some still standing on the shore, start playing their cantillés.
Louhi doesn't like the music. She commands her trolls to cover their ears, but then she asks them to attack. But the boring song makes them nod off, and only Louhi is left awake.
Louhi goes to the north wind and sets it free once again, ordering it to destroy the villagers of Kalevala. The wind blows, and some of the villagers are frozen over, but are quickly released from their icy would-be tombs.
Then she sends her trusty cloak out to fight Lemminkäinen. It's an amusing wrestling match between Lemminkäinen and that cloak.
Yeah, Lemminkäinen seems to be having a tougher time battling this cloak than he should. But some of the villagers pitch in and get a hold of the cloak, take it back to a hole they had carved in the ice, and successfully drown it.
Väinämöinen tells Lemminkäinen that now is the time for him to go release the sun. He doesn't really do the hard parts here, just the easy parts. Louhi tries to prevent him from getting in the door where the sun is stored. But as she presses herself against the cave door, she becomes stone as well.
Lemminkäinen takes his sword and breaks down the door, setting the sun free, and the men travel back to Kalevala.
The women are waiting for them. Now there's light and color everywhere. Lemminkäinen and Annikki share a tepid embrace. Väinämöinen says, "May the sun always shine on the world. May there always be love in the world." And then the narrator introduces the cast by their fake names. And that's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about The Day the Earth Froze from 1964.
Sampo, later retitled The Day the Earth Froze for American release, is based loosely on the events depicted in the Finnish national epic Kalevala, a voluminous collection of Finnish folk songs that were kept alive from generation to generation by being sung at feasts and gatherings. Aleksandr Ptushko asked lyricist Väinö Kaukonen and writers Viktor Vitkovich and Grigori Yagdfeld to condense the tales of the Kalevala into the screenplay, using only the 7 chapters concerning the forging of the magical mill called the Sampo.
Sampo was a Soviet Mosfilm production for the most part. Finnish film companies were reluctant to participate, but Suomi-filmi was eventually persuaded to join the production. Each scene was shot a total of 4 times using 2 cameras, and in both standard and anamorphic widescreen aspect ratios. The film was produced in both Russian and Finnish, and the dialogue was dubbed in afterwards. Sampo was the first Finnish film to feature surround sound with 4 channels.
Shooting is said to have taken 2 full years due to the constantly adverse weather conditions. Some scenes were shot in Ukraine, while most outdoor shooting was done in Finland. Interior scenes were filmed in Mosfilm studios in Moscow.
An outfit called Renaissance Films was responsible for the American release. And in researching this movie, we found conflicting reports of who directed all the changes. Some sources put this as a Roger Corman/film group production, while others said AIP was responsible for the Americanization of Sampo. The AIP lobby cards have a film group copyright on them, but The Day the Earth Froze is not listed officially as a film group production.
Yeah, we were working on researching this, trying to work this all out, up until it was time for us to record, and I'm still not sure we worked this out.
So we're going to be a little vague here, but just know it could be either, both, or neither.
But the reason that we chose The Day the Earth Froze to review as part of our television series is because we know for sure it aired in AIP television packages.
Whoever ordered it, significant changes to the film were made. 24 minutes was cut from Sampo to make The Day the Earth Froze, decreasing the 91-minute runtime to 67 minutes. The rest of the film was restructured, re-edited, and it was reformatted for release in Film Group's non-anamorphic Vistascope format.
The movie's credits were altered, replacing the Russo-Finnish credits with English-language titles and names. For example, Aleksandr Ptushko was Greg Sibelius, Andris Ošiņš was listed as John Powers, and Kivi was listed as Nina Anderson. Lönnrot's name was misspelled and mispronounced as Lönnrot in the American version. And I'm sure I mispronounced it too.
Yeah, we're not experts on pronouncing Finnish names. AIP's press book took the fake names and went even further, creating fake biographies for Powers and Anderson, giving them new nationalities, backgrounds, and even hobbies. In the press book, it said Estonian actress Kivi was actually Finnish American, and that her hobbies were figure skating and stamp collecting. And John Powers was Swiss and a ski lift operator. Very silly.
Renaissance Films, or whoever was responsible for all this, also added narration from Marvin Miller, who by the time the film was released had achieved fame as the star of the television series The Millionaire, and he was given top billing in the film's advertisements.
Some of the scenes that were cut from Sampo and that we missed in this version were Lemminkäinen confronting Louhi and her trolls, being escorted to the Sampo and standing in awe. And while he is in awe of the Sampo's beauty, he's murdered by a serpent bite and thrown into the sea.
Another has Lemminkäinen's mother searching for her son, asking the birch tree, the mountain path, and the sun. She then walks across the sea to Pohjola and confronts Louhi, who tells her Lemminkäinen has left his tribesmen behind. Lemminkäinen's mother refuses to believe this, and Louhi reluctantly tells her the truth.
Then Lemminkäinen's mom asks the gods for help, and Lemminkäinen is washed up on the shore, and she carries him back to Kalevala. Upon arrival, his mother rubs soil into his lips, and the birch tree gives her sap, and then the sun glows brightly, and Lemminkäinen is restored to life. So we missed all that.
The original release dates for Sampo were August 24th, 1959 in the Soviet Union, and October 16th, 1959 in Finland. In the United States, The Day the Earth Froze was released theatrically in 1964 and was still playing in theaters as late as 1967, years after its television release.
American International Television released The Day the Earth Froze as part of its Amazing 65 and Sci-Fi 65 television packages.
The 2014 Finnish DVD released by Finkino is uncut, presented in the correct 2:35:1 anamorphic ratio, and color tinting. Deaf Crocodile released a Blu-ray in 2022 with a reproduction of cinematographer Gennady Sekevich's work. Mosfilm has released their cut of the film on their YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, so you can watch that. You might not understand it, but it is much nicer looking. Sampo's taglines include, "The most chilling terror ever experienced."
"Thousands against an ominous diabolical force from another world."
"You'll chill to the most fantastic terror man has ever known."
The Day the Earth Froze was riffed on an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000, Season 4, Episode 22. The MST3K version was released on DVD by Shout Factory as part of the 25th anniversary set in November of 2013.
But for a more contemporary reaction, Box Office Magazine reviewed the theatrical release of The Day the Earth Froze, using the American names that were inserted into the credits for the movie. Quote, "Budgeted at $1 million, this Julius Strandberg production teaming Nina Anderson and John Powers should be welcomed stateside for its very novelty alone. Essentially a folk tale of peasant folk in ancient Finland putting their common sense and wholesome taste against a vindictive she-witch. Jerome Langstrom's special effects are impressive, particularly in the climactic sequences. Greg Sibelius has attended to direction, seeming ever mindful of the need for fanciful touches in treatment of a legend that's been told countless times in Finland." End quote. So now that we've got that opinion, and of course we've both seen the Mystery Science Theater version of The Day the Earth Froze, but let's talk about how we feel about it.
Well, this is kind of an unusual movie in the AIP catalog. And as we said, it was technically released by Renaissance Pictures, which seems to be a one-trick pony. They don't seem to have had any other releases. So is it an arm of AIP? Probably.
Or a cover, maybe?
Cover might be a good way to put it, because this film just doesn't really fit in. There's been evidence of theatrical showings after the television showings where it was paired up with other AIP product. But it seems to be theater by theater, and it wasn't like a wide release strategy.
No. And like we said, we couldn't find out a whole lot about the editing process for making this into a movie that could air theatrically in America, but also on television. And I thought it was strange that when they had Larry Buchanan make movies for them, they had to be 80 minutes long. But this movie was cut from 90 minutes to 67 minutes, which is awfully short for a television movie.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
And considering everything they cut out, things that were actually important to the story, it's just interesting that they didn't put them back. I watched that sequence of the mother walking across the lake, pond, ocean, whatever, to Pajola to get Lemminkäinen. And it wouldn't have required a lot of dubbing. And I think it was possibly the right length to fit in the movie to make it better for television. So I wonder why they didn't include that.
Well, I think that goes back to its origins. Assuming that it was brought over by Roger Corman, he knew this wasn't going to be the top of any billing.
Right.
And he intended it for a theatrical release. So it makes sense that he would cut it down to 67 minutes because that's what a lot of those films were at that time. Especially
if they were on the bottom of a double bill or triple bill. They wouldn't want a very long movie there. So I can see while the runtime makes sense theatrically, it doesn't make sense for television.
Well, it was intended theatrically, and that's why the television packages had to deal with the runtime, I think.
It's also true that once the American cut of the movie was released, not a lot of people were able to find the longer version of it. It wasn't even available in America till that 2022 DVD release.
Yeah, the Deaf Crocodile Blu-ray release is pretty amazing to watch. The film probably never even looked that good in 1959.
No, but it is fantastic to see in widescreen as opposed to the 4:3.
So if you're going to watch this movie, I would recommend going for the Deaf Crocodile release, which I think is out of print now, unfortunately.
Oh, well, that's too bad, but anything's available if you look hard enough. But what did you think about the movie itself, though? Everything apart, not even talking about the release or the editing. What did you think of the story of the movie?
Well, the story is essentially a fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a wicked witch. You've got a hero who happens to be a woodsman. That's almost a common thing. If you're not a prince, you got to be a woodsman.
I thought it had a lot in common with the Wizard of Oz as well.
Well, you got a witch cackling while flying over the sea.
She has a flying cloak instead of flying monkeys. We have Annikki instead of Dorothy. And she's not really driving the story the way Lemminkäinen kind of is. He's not really much of a hero, but he's the hero.
No, he's kind of a gung-ho guy. He's just not very successful in anything he tries to do on his own. He needs a lot of setup from other people to have anything go in his favor.
Ilmarinen is the hero of this movie, I think, because that guy can make anything.
He's a superhero. He's a god.
He's not an ordinary man like everyone else in the movie.
And Annikki has some of those superpowers too, because she makes flowers bloom.
Right. Yeah, she frolics with bears. Are they dangerous? Not to her. She's the Snow White, and he's a wizard, basically. I like this movie, though. I like fairy tales. It's one of my secret passions, I guess. I've studied a lot of them from other countries, and to me, I thought this was a really good story. Even the cut-up version, I think it had enough of the gist of the story to make it enjoyable. And in addition to the story, the visuals are fantastic.
Much more so in the Deaf Crocodile Blu-ray than any of the washed out Day of the Earth Froze prints you'd be able to find.
Absolutely. And that we did watch the enhanced video with the English dubbing when we watched this movie. And it was still the American cut, but we got to see the better quality video. And seeing that, the colors are lush and vibrant. The Sampo is super cool. It's almost got a 3D glistening effect. Very neat. It's like watching 3D without the glasses, is how I would put it. With the green and red, and hard to describe, but if you do get to see it, you'll know what I mean.
The whole history of this movie is just so strange. And the fact that it was ever brought to America at all is kind of miraculous, because a movie like this, you wouldn't expect to find an audience, let alone, I don't know if it really has a cult following, but a lot of people are at least aware of this movie, and I'm assuming most of those were from people who remember it from viewing it on television in the 1960s.
Or from watching it in a Mystery Science Theater in the 1990s.
In more modern times, yes.
Right. But it is amazing that they even found the film. This is just a little oddball Finnish folktale. And the fact that they got their hands on it and thought, this will make a great episode, is kind of amazing. As with most dub movies, I don't think the dubbing was that good. And we did miss some of the folk songs, I believe. There was a lot more singing and music in the uncut version.
But at least they kept the most important part, is where the music conquers all.
That is good. That's a good lesson to learn. I guess I know why they took the characters' Finnish names and then gave them American-friendly names. But to invent the whole backstory for them, that was crazy. Did Americans really need to know, or did they just not even know these actors at all? And so they had to create something from nothing.
Well, that was for potential press releases. So you have to think that a periodical would be desperate enough to print this information in the first place. So probably not a lot of people actually saw that information.
No, probably not. I don't even know if people paid attention to press books back then. It obviously got into Box Office Magazine. They saw it and they took those names as actual names.
So theater owners would have seen it.
Right.
But they wouldn't have cared.
No. But we saw it, so it still exists. But I guess, as we always say, it was a different time back then.
What really strikes me is that a Sampo wouldn't really have too much value in today's society.
No. If you can have all you want of anything, it's not valuable anymore. Except flour. That's a resource that you have to keep renewing. Maybe salt.
Fresh water would be nice.
It said it made honey, too. That would be cool to have fresh honey. I don't know what the bees would be doing with their time. Yeah, fresh water would be fantastic. We live in Phoenix.
Today would have to make gasoline, and that's just bad for the environment.
Right. But isn't it the processing that's bad? If gasoline just sort of flowed out. I mean, the processing is half the battle. If we didn't have to dig up the crude and then process it into gasoline, if all we had to do was take our car to the Sampo station.
The fumes when you burn it is a problem.
Oh, of course. I know that's still a problem. Well, maybe the Sampo could make it.
If it can make anything, it can make
a fuel that burns water vapor instead of fumes.
Non-combustible fuel.
Right. It could change the world. We had a Sampo.
All right, I changed my mind. I want one.
I think if it does whatever you ask, it's just your creativity is the only limit.
So what I think about this movie is it's a cute film, and I could see it playing more matinees than as the second billing after Wild Angels or something like that. It
does seem a lot more like the fairy tale movies that AIP bought that we haven't talked about yet, but they did get a lot of German folk tales like Snow White, Cinderella, those kinds of.
Well, those were childhood productions, and AIP gathered them up into a television package.
Right, and we haven't looked at any of those. And it does seem more fitting with those. This would be something you could take your kids to. There's absolutely nothing too scary. There's no real violence, especially they cut the part out where Lemminkäinen is murdered. It's family friendly enough that it would be a good afternoon movie.
It's not a date movie.
Oh, no, not at all. And it's not something you'd want to stay till 1 a.m. to watch at the theater on a Saturday night. All right, Jeff. So as we always do, let's rate the movie using our AIP scale where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic.
Well, I'm finding this movie a little difficult to rate because of the way that I experienced it. Having done all this research and knowing its background, and then having watched the original version with subtitles, as well as the Americanized version, and having the original in the Deaf Crocodile release just look incredible compared to the Americanized version, it's hard to rate the film on what the film actually is compared to everything that I saw. Mm. If I was just to look at The Day the Earth Froze on its own, I might be inclined to give it a lower rating because the print is muddy and it loses so much in the muddy print.
It does.
And it's not that the story is boring. It's still kind of weird, but it's weird no matter how you look at it. And if you're looking at it amongst the entire AIP catalog, it's really, really weird. But it's a fun story. It's a fantasy. It's a world where things happen that can't. In our reality, there can't be anything like a Sampo, at least not up to this point in time. There are no witches with magic cloaks. And as much as we would like it, I'm afraid that music does not conquer all. But taking everything into account, I think it's a good enough story. And I'm going to go ahead and give this one an A. But if you watch it, I do recommend you check down the Deaf Crocodile Blu-ray I watched with the subtitles as opposed to the Americanized version. What are your thoughts, Cheryl?
I think we're pretty much in agreement. But I do think there's one aspect of the movie that you didn't mention, and that it's funny. It's really funny because it's so silly. I think we both thought the funniest part was where the cloak comes after Lemminkäinen at the end and he's wrestling in it. It looks like there's somebody inside that, like pulling at him. It's just so silly and it's fun to watch. It's good for a laugh, but it's also a good story. And I think that's like the best of both worlds. When you have a story that has these touches of humor, but it's not just goofy because the filmmakers don't know what they're doing. It's just funny. And I enjoyed that part of it. In addition to the fairy tale aspect, even in the muddy print, the visuals are still pretty cool. They're just better experienced in the Deaf Crocodile version. But I think that there's so much lushness and richness in this that some of that does carry over to the ugly Americanized TV version of the movie. It's just much, much more vivid and vibrant in the Deaf Crocodile modern release. Or if you track down the Russian version, maybe you know Russian, I don't know, and watch that. I'm going to give it an A as well. I've always had a soft spot for this movie ever since seeing it on Mystery Science Theater, just because it's fun. They had fun with it. They didn't hate it. If you read their book, they say that it's one of the better movies that they ever had on the show, and they enjoyed doing it. And I enjoyed watching it, so it's an easy A for me. All right, well, that wraps up this episode of the American International Podcast and the last episode of our American International television series. Next week, we're going back to theatrical releases.
Until then, I'm Jeff Markin.
And I'm Cheryl Lightfoot. Stay tuned. And next time, we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.